Hello, and welcome to the Special Report. I'm your host, Areva Martin, and this is the show where we tackle the critical issues impacting our communities, providing you with trusted information and resources that you need and that you can use. We separate fact from fiction right here on the Special Report. And did we have a big weekend right here in Los Angeles? Yes, President Trump surveyed the fire damage to the Pacific Palisades, which is considered the affluent part of Los Angeles, where a lot of movie stars live, but he did not make his way to Altadena. That's the community where you've heard a lot about. A lot of Black folks and people of color live in Altadena. They felt a little slighted about Trump not visiting those areas, but while he was here, Trump dropped a lot of bombs. He called FEMA a disaster. He talked about dismantling that agency, saying that states needed to handle their own disasters, suggesting that perhaps FEMA dollars and FEMA personnel and FEMA staff wouldn't even be available for disaster victims. Sparked a lot of controversy, obviously. He took our great mayor, Karen Bass, to task, really tried to dress her down in front of the press and in front of a lot of Republicans who had lined up to be there to support Donald Trump. So we're going to be talking about that and also the rain. Yes, we got some rain in Los Angeles over the weekend. We're going to talk to an LA Fire Department captain about what that rain means for the fires and those folks that were worried about mudslides. And speaking of FEMA, lots going on with FEMA. A lot of folks have applied. A lot of folks have been turned down. A lot of folks are wondering how they can apply to get those FEMA benefits, at least while they are still available. Well, as you can see, we have an action-packed show planned for you today, and we want you to be informed and prepared. So we are glad you're joining us right here on the Special Report. So stay tuned and let's dive in.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Is a fire or a tornado or a flood? What do any of those natural disasters have to do with politics? Well, if you've been watching carefully, you've been watching the news, you've been following the news, the answer is they have a whole lot to do with politics. Because when you have a natural disaster, quite frankly, the government is involved. The government has to respond. Typically, the government is blamed for not being prepared for the natural disaster. So no surprise that the brush fires in Los Angeles, Pacific Palisades, the Eden fires, and other fires that have erupted over the last couple of weeks have been the subject of a lot of debate and controversy from elected officials, from Donald Trump all the way down to the Los Angeles mayor and the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. So when Donald Trump visited Los Angeles on Friday and made the decision to go to the Pacific Palisades, a very wealthy, very white part of Los Angeles, and not visit Altadena, very Black, very Latino, middle class and working class and kind of upper middle class neighborhood, a lot of folks were giving him the side eye. Like, how is it that he ended up in the Pacific Palisades but didn't visit the Altadena community, particularly since that is where the majority of the deaths occurred from the brush fires? 7,000 to 10,000 structures burned, a whole community burned to the ground, but yet not worthy of a visit from the president. And also comments Donald Trump made while he was in Los Angeles, blaming everyone from our governor, Gavin Newsom, to our mayor, and I do call her our great mayor, Karen Bass. A lot of folks upset with Donald Trump, with the comments he made. Rumor is he didn't even invite Gavin Newsom to survey the community with him or participate in his briefing or the press conference, although we were told Gavin Newsom stationed himself on the tarmac at the airport to be there to get in Trump's face. Well, what does all of this mean for those folks who are just trying to put their lives back together again? I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it with my good friend Fatimah Gilliam. She's an attorney. She's also a diversity expert. She's written a great book called Anti-Racism, What Your Black Friend Didn't Tell You. I think I'm getting the name of that book wrong. Fatimah, you'll correct me because I want to make sure everybody finds that book. But Fatimah is joining me to talk about the politics of natural disasters and this visit by Donald Trump. So Fatimah, thank you. Correct me. Tell me the name of your book again so that I'm not butchering the name.
Well, thanks for having me. The title of my book is Race Rules, What Your Black Friend Won't Tell You.
Okay. Great. We're going to make sure that everybody finds that book. Go and check it out, because in this moment when Donald Trump is trying to dismantle everything that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is the kind of book you absolutely need. And we need to support diversity experts like Fatimah, because they are helping us fight this attack on diversity. But Fatimah, I wanted to talk with you because Donald Trump was here. You're from Los Angeles. You've lived here. You have relatives that live in Los Angeles. So you know the difference between the Pacific Palisades and the Altadena community. What do you make of the fact that Trump visited the Palisades, very wealthy, very ritzy community, but didn't stop to visit Altadena?
You know, unfortunately, that was just Trump being Trump. I mean, it tracks with what's important to him, what's interesting to him, and what is important and interesting to him are locations that have wealthy people and that have white people. Given the fact that Altadena has a historically people of color population, doesn't have the same median income as the Pacific Palisades, that's not a community that he wanted to particularly visit. But what is really important to notice here is that when a country has a natural disaster, when there are fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever is happening, that it is not the role of the president and elected officials to prioritize, the demographics of people as opposed to stepping in the place of the government, which is there to be a force to have a safety net or rescue or show compassion for the people who are devastated by that fire. And so I think it's extremely offensive to the people of California that President Trump is trying to politicize what's taking place, right? Wanting to peg FEMA dollars and support whether or not there's a voter ID law, which has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not somebody's home burned down.
Yeah, a lot of statements made by Trump while in Los Angeles, very disturbing. He told Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles and Pacific Palisades, so that everybody is clear, happens to be a part of Los Angeles. Now, the Eaton fire, which impacted Altadena and Pasadena, that's in Los Angeles County, but Mayor Bass is not the mayor of Pasadena or Altadena. The Altadena community, not a city, doesn't have a mayor, doesn't have a city council. It's called unincorporated County of Los Angeles. So the county board of supervisors, and there happens to be 5 of those women, they're all women at this moment, that part of the county is governed or overseen by one of the supervisors. Her name is Catherine Barger. She happens to be the only Republican, Fatimah, on that board of supervisors. So Trump tells Karen Bass in this briefing, this press conference, that she has emergency powers just like he does. But he's scolding her because he says he's told that the residents of Pacific Palisades can't get back into their homes for about 18 months. And he's saying, you got to do that sooner. You got to let them in. He's basically saying, like, that night, Friday night, let those folks back in their home. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think it's very unrealistic. I mean, I haven't personally experienced what the people are going through whose homes have burned down, but I can understand that they're frustrated. But the reality is this, right? It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you just open up and allow people to go back and then they're exposed to toxic fumes. I mean, I've been reading all of these reports about the air quality, right? That when these homes burned, you've got lead, you have asbestos, you have all kinds of toxins that are in the air, on the ground, covering every piece of burnt, charred furniture, everything that is left. So it is important to make sure that we make sure people are safe. I mean, I grew up in California, but I live in New York. And living in New York, my office building was right across the street from the Twin Towers, right? When the World Trade Center went down. Thank God I wasn't there when that happened. But Lower Manhattan has endless health problems. There are people that are dying of lung cancer, the first responders, the people that lived in Lower Manhattan. The toxic impact of that is paramount. It is huge. And so it is only important, and understandable that somebody like Karen Bass and other elected officials want to make sure that people aren't going to go into a cancer dome, right? And you want to make sure that people aren't going to become sick. It is not going to be smooth. It is not going to be easy. It is going to be difficult for people to get permits and all of those kinds of things. But people are also going to have to understand this is a cataclysmic disaster impacting, thousands and thousands of homes and people that's going to drain resources, drain the number of contractors that are available. I'm going to assume there are going to be fewer people who could do the work if we're coming for all of the immigrants at the same time. So I don't know who's going to do that construction work, but there are a multitude of problems. And I think the way that Trump was responding to Karen Bass is unrealistic given the scale of the disaster.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up two really important points. One, 9/11, and I was at a town hall in Pasadena, Altadena over the last week, and one of the residents said she had moved from New York, but she remembered, just like you did, how many people from 9/11 have been diagnosed with cancer, the first responders. And this is, years and years after.
People are still getting diagnosed.
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off. They're still being diagnosed. They still have a fund to address people who are coming up with new diseases, new ailments. And so it's important for the response in California to take that into consideration. Sorry, I know I cut you off.
No, and that's okay, because it brings me to my next question, which is the double standard. So Trump was in New York at 9/11. That's when New Yorkers still liked Donald Trump. He had such a big...
Did we though?
Well, some of y'all did. He had a big footprint. He still claimed New York as his home, right? He hadn't moved to Florida, but he knows, my only point is that he knows the magnitude of that disaster and the suffering. So for him to come and say to Karen Bass, like, get those people back in their homes tonight or right away, is disingenuous. And it raises the question about, is there a double standard for Black women in power?
1000% there's a double standard. I mean, one thing that we know from Trump's first administration, the time in between when he was still trying to claim that he was actually elected, and the new time of now when he's the president for the second time, he cannot handle strong Black women. He just, it is just a threat and affront to who he is and how he sees himself functioning in the world. So he has a very hard time dealing with anyone who gives pushback, but in particular to Black women, right? And the people that have come for him during the time when he wasn't president were Black women. I mean, you have Letitia James in New York City or in New York State coming for him. You had, Fani Willis down in Atlanta. You had the judge Chuckin, I'm messing up her name, right? He can't handle it. So it's only understandable that he was treating her in an inappropriate, offensive way that's completely unrealistic and unreasonable. The other thing, though, I'll say about the role of the government, what's going to be critical is dealing with the insurance problem, right? Because we have climate change. He's got climate deniers in his administration, but who does recognize climate change? Insurance companies, right? And so as a result of that, they are dropping people's policies because they know it. So their only way to deal with that, it's going to require a government intervention.
Yeah, and the other point you mentioned, Fatima, is about Trump's policies. We saw these raids over the weekend, ICE raids going into sensitive areas, or areas that had previously been deemed sensitive. And you can't help but imagine, like, the workforce in California, the construction workers, the hospitality workers, the infrastructure workers, so many of those workers are Latinos. They're immigrants from various countries, not just Latin American countries, but other countries as well. And so if those folks are afraid to go out the house, afraid to show up at a job site, afraid to apply for a job for fear that they might be deported, that's going to make the rebuilding process even just all the longer and the more complicated and more difficult for families across the region, not just in the Pacific Palisades. And then this talk about FEMA telling states that they need to handle their own disasters. The federal government may not be there. I want you to take a look at this clip that sparked a lot of controversy when Trump was in Los Angeles over the weekend.
Calling all by uncertain.
You don't need FEMA. You need a good state government. You have your own, essentially, FEMA. You fix it yourself.
You fix it yourself. So we all pay our federal income taxes. We all are good law-abiding citizens. And then when we have a disaster, the president of the United States tells us states to fix it ourselves. That was a very controversial statement and made a lot of people nervous about whether FEMA was even going to be around to help them out of this disaster. Is this just Trump being Trump, just trying to spark controversy, or do you think there's some truth? I mean, FEMA's created by Congress. In theory, he wouldn't be able to just with the stroke of a pen, eliminate FEMA, but we know he doesn't have a lot of respect for the Constitution.
Well, he definitely does not respect the rule of law. That is for sure. If FEMA disappears, it's going to be a disaster. This is one of the core functions of a government, regardless of whether or not you're a Republican or a Democrat or independent or whatever, when there's a hurricane, the hurricane isn't checking to see what party you voted for, right? And so this is the core function, and he's stepping away from that core function. And and there's this interesting saying that I love that says, doesn't apply technically for everyone, but a lot of people are libertarians until their town needs a bailout. And this is a situation, people's town or their home or their community is going to need a bailout. And do I think he's serious? I do. But if there's a way to privatize it, if there's a way for one of his oligarch friends to somehow monetize the situation, I mean, the Kushners, they do a lot of building. The Trumps do a lot of building. So maybe there's also an angle for them to come in and somehow be the Trump-Kushner, disaster rescue corporation that really doesn't rescue you, but somehow takes your money.
And that's what scares me, Fatima. A lot of people aren't thinking about that, but of course, it's something you and I talk about a lot. In the wee hours of the night or morning when we should be asleep, we're texting about this issue. But yes, from the post office to so many branches of government, we know the end game for Trump is fire employees, dismantle the departments, and then send this out to private corporations. Like, we see private prisons, and we see so many other functions of government that have been privatized. Why not FEMA? Why not have some billion-dollar private corporation run by someone like Elon Musk, whose job it is to come in and do the work of FEMA?
Well, this is why there's some things that are definitely supposed to be left to the government, because when you privatize it, that means essential services and functions fall through the cracks, because they're going to focus on profits and they're going to figure out a way to not deliver appropriate services. I mean, even if you look at the privatization of the prison system, I mean, you have people who, aren't getting enough food. Maybe they're on a bed that's covered in bed bugs. They had a guy that literally died in prison from bed bugs. You know what I mean? And so there are, people have to pay all this money to make phone calls to their family. I mean, all of these things that are happening when you privatize it. And if a natural disaster would have that response, then you will get more of what you're currently seeing, which is that Trump went to visit people in the Pacific Palisades and the Malibu area, but didn't go to the Altadena Eaton Fire area, right? So instead, they're just going to go to where they're going to get the most money, the most value, and leave a whole bunch of people stranded.
Yeah, and not to mention the cost. I mean, you think about the cost that these private prisons, how much states and the federal government have to pay for them to be operated. So I can only imagine the cost of, responding to a natural disaster. Does that cost get passed on to the states? Do the states pass it on to cities? Do cities then pass it on to taxpayers? Do we then have to pay additional taxes for any kind of relief? And as you mentioned, climate change, we can expect fires, tornadoes, floods. I mean, it's just no end to what we can expect to happen in terms of these natural disasters. Well, we don't know if this was just, Trump blowing off, at the handle, flying off at the handle, I should say, trying to spark controversy, or if there really is a part of Project 2025 that does away with FEMA. But we know a lot of people are very nervous, very concerned. A lot of people are hurting. These fires are real. I've been to the area in Eaton Canyon, in Altadena, where the fires happen. I've talked to, right here on a special report, families, and I've been on the ground with families, and I can tell you firsthand, this is not a laughing matter. This is no time to play politics with people's lives. People have lost everything, not to mention like 27 or so people were dead, and there's still over 24 people, or around 24 people missing, who we should presume are probably dead as well. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend Fatima. Keep doing the great work you're doing. There's so much work, obviously, to be done with this administration. So again, thanks for joining me. We're also today catching you up on what happened over the weekend with respect to rain. Yes, a lot of folks were excited in LA because we haven't had rain in months. I think the last count was like 8 months or so. So I'm happy that Craig Little, a Los Angeles Fire Department Public Information Officer, is back. He joined us earlier last week. He's been our source of information, accurate information in terms of what is happening on the ground with these fires. Craig, great to see you again. Thank you for coming back. I know you and your LA Fire Department crew are so incredibly busy right now. So thanks for taking some time. Let's talk about the rains. We hadn't seen rains in LA for months, but we had some rain over the weekend. How did that help, if it did, with containment of the fires?
Well, first of all, great seeing you again and speaking with you. As of right now, rain is always, when we have a situation like this, a fire this large, rain is always welcome. However, with that comes mud and debris flows that follow that. And we have already had sections of Pacific Coast Highway closed off. I'm not sure about the Eaton fire, what's going on there. I'm sure there's probably mud and debris flows there. Essentially, when you have vegetation that has burned away down to the roots, there's nothing underneath the soil to keep it in place, and especially if we're on steep terrain, and there's a ton of steep terrain up and down Pacific Coast Highway where there is nothing holding it back at this point. So we're fortunate that it's not widespread. There are strategic sections that do have mud flow, and those areas have been closed off to automobile traffic.
So we're hearing some good numbers, Craig. The Pacific Palisades fire, 94% contained. Hughes fire, 95% containment. Eaton fire, 98%. Again, for folks who maybe didn't see you a couple of days ago, containment doesn't mean extinguish, does it?
Exactly. Containment is just an area around the fire where it will not have the potential to spread at all. So at this point, when you look at 98%, and let's say if we have the fire in a circle and there is a circle on the outside of that fire, usually that goes 30 to 50 feet out of an area where the fire that's inside will not be able to jump over that area. So we have that fire contained, at least with the Eaton fire, 98%. So if you were to look at a circle and a line around that circle, you would have about a 2% gap where there's not 100% containment. Where we have the Palisades fire, it's about 95%. Again, you'd have a 5% gap where the fire is not contained. So those are good numbers in conjunction with the rains that we've had.
So if we don't get any more rains, and I'm not sure what the forecast is there any danger of additional fires related to the main ones, Palisades, Hughes, or Eaton, or with the levels of containment? Are you pretty certain that we're out of danger as it relates to those three fires spreading?
We are never going to be 100% sure. I wouldn't go out on the line and say that. Rains, the amount of containment, that's very good news to hear. There's factors involved with maybe there are still maybe burning embers underneath the burned material that could still be existing right now. But I'd say the chances are minimal of any more spread for either one of these fires.
And we're in February, typically not considered fire season, right, in Los Angeles. I can remember when I first moved to LA some years ago, rainy season. February brought a lot of rain, but given how climate has been shifting, climate change, what are you all bracing for in the month of February as we approach?
Okay. Well, there was a time when we actually had a definitive fire season, and we've been saying for the last 2 or 3 years, fire season is all year long as far as that goes. So we are bracing for different issues. Like I'm saying, the rains are welcome all around the Southland as far as that goes, but that can dry off quick enough with a few hot days, and then we're back to where we started from.
So we know that there are a lot of folks who are a little upset because they're not allowed to go back into their homes. We heard Donald Trump, when he was here on Friday, tell Mayor Bass, let those people back in their home. They can't wait 18 months. I guess 18 months has become the time frame that the Army Corps of Engineers and other experts have said is going to take for the cleanup to happen. But what do you say to those folks that can't get into their homes to get belongings out? Those people whose homes maybe are still standing and want to just get some personal items.
I can't really speak to the political aspect of it, but from my point of view, if there is a delay for you entering your home, it is for your own health and safety. There's still products of combustion or toxic materials that have burned, plastics, lithium-ion batteries, heavy metals. All of those can play havoc. Not maybe immediately when you're sifting through the whatever is left of your home, but down the line. So a prime example of that is when they were going through 911, 9/11, people were sifting through different things, find symptoms of cancer years down the line. So it sounds great to say, well, let those people into their houses, and people who are the homeowners are great to hear that. But thinking about the long-term effects is what we're concerned with. So we want to have the proper hazmat teams that come out there and are able to do the testing of the materials before we possibly let you back in your home. Now it's gotten to the point where we really can't stress that enough, and if people are going to go into their homes, we have to let them at this point, which is kind of frustrating.
So are you aware, and maybe coming from the LA County Fire Department, about this time frame, this 18-month time frame? I know I was at a public informational meeting on Friday night, and there were individuals there from the Army Corps of Engineers and others with the LA County who said that that's what they were estimating for folks to get the kind of cleanup that's going to give them some assurance that the properties that are delivered back to them are free of these kind of toxics and these chemicals that could be hazardous to them. Is that the time frame that the county has decided that this cleanup is going to take for some of these areas?
I really don't have the exact time frame. That's probably changed over the last week, and I really can't speak on that because I haven't given the official word on what that would be. But what I do know is utilities are going to be months away as far as gas returning, electric, and water. Just because of the magnitude of both of those areas, well, 3 areas now, of getting back all of the utilities where that's concerned. It's one thing maybe returning utilities to a couple of houses, but when we're talking thousands of houses and an entire grid pattern of gas, electric, and water, that's going to take a while. We have these utility companies that are working overtime trying to get everyone up and running, and it's going to be a long process. So, and that's what I can speak on.
And so that means even for those homes that didn't burn, obviously, if they're in the burned out area, they won't have access to, as you said, those critical utilities, water, gas, electricity either. So those
Correct.
folks will be displaced in the same manner as the homes that burned.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead, finish.
No, I was actually in the Palisades, and there was a house, I don't know if you heard about it on the news, that actually had a fire prevention system on their home, where there is an app that they can use, and actually turns the sprinklers on in the house when conditions come up. There's a fire retardant that's deployed, and these people can do it actually remotely with their phone while they're away from their house. Now, having said that, their house is pristine right now. If you saw it on the news, it's a pristine house. They had to come back and get their things because it's still not inhabitable because they don't have their utilities. I don't see personally having a house that is actually pristine and everything is gone around me. That's probably not the happiest situation to be living in, although you do have your home.
You know, I was going to add, that brings me to another question. I talked to a friend who lives in Ladera Heights, again, unincorporated county of Los Angeles. You know the area well. And they built a brand new house. She says a smart house. She says they have just what you described, sprinkler systems everywhere, something with the roofing, the ability to drop this fire retardant, to do all of these things that would keep their house from burning down, presumably, if there was a brush fire or a serious fire in that community. But if all the homes on the block don't have that, you know, would you still recommend that folks make that kind of investment in their own home?
No, it depends. It depends on, their attachment to that piece of property. Whether they want to live in an area where they're the only ones on the block for, who knows how long. And also, here's the other thing. There's a cost involved with all of that, and it's pretty steep. So the people that I spoke with and that I heard on yesterday on the news, there's the cost of actually implementing that system, and then there's the cost for the subscription service, or what it costs to work. So we're looking at a minimum of $500 a month. Not your average person probably doesn't have $500 a month to pay for something like that for a maybe. So, there's that as well.
Well, I guess maybe one benefit is you maybe can't inhabit the house while the community is being rebuilt, but maybe you haven't lost all your precious items, like your pictures from your childhood, or a lot of folks in the Palisades have talked about losing their Emmy awards, their Oscars, and their other, awards. So maybe if you have that elaborate system, you don't lose the contents of your home. But let's talk about average people, regular fire preparation people that, don't have, I would imagine, just even building a smart home like that is probably tens of thousands of dollars more than your average build of a home. But does the county require homeowners to do some things that would help mitigate the impact of these fires?
Well, we always have our annual brush inspections where we inspect people's property that are what we call it's a wildland urban interface area, whether they're on the edge of a cliff or a mountainside where there's heavy vegetation. We always encourage people to clean and clear the areas. Optimally, we'd love 300 feet. Sometimes that's not possible, but as far back as they can, and what we call a defensible space. So a defensible space allows firefighters to come in between your home and the burning vegetation to fight that fire. So we do encourage people to do that. If their violations are egregious, we do have a form that we fill out, we hand to them and said, okay, we need you to clear this area by this certain time. We'll come back at a certain time. If it's not done, then we hand it over to another entity that will actually, if they fail to do it, they will clean it for them and charge them a fee for it, for the clearing of the area. So there are things in effect. They've been in effect for years as far as people clearing their brush from their home. Now, having a fire that is at hurricane speeds, a hurricane being 75 miles per hour or greater, with dry humidity, you can clear all the brush you want, but if embers are burned for miles away, there's nothing really you can do about that. Smoke, heated gases.
Let me ask you, what about that smart house? If embers had, hit that smart house, would it have,
Oh, Himbers did hit that smart house. So yeah, it was mitigated. So
Wow.
yeah, as you can tell from the homes on either side of them, across the street from them, everything was burned and theirs were completely intact. So you also have to weigh that. It's like, okay, $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year, plus whatever the setup is. Maybe it's worth it for you to invest in something
It
like
seems like it'd be worth it for the county to even provide some incentives for people to do that, because imagine if every house, and obviously that must be a newer home, so some of the homes that are burned in these fires are 75, 100 years old, particularly in Altadena. So, who knows what the cost would be to bring that age of a house up to par. But it feels like to me that we've got to get more advanced, more innovative in our technology. And if you're telling me that the technology exists for that smart home, even though right now it's very expensive, it's kind of like electric vehicles, right? That seemed unaffordable, unachievable, but it's here. The moment is here. We're already looking at how it benefits our climate to have more electric vehicles versus gas vehicles. So might that be the wave of the future? And not just something for the rich and famous in the Palisades.
it could possibly be coming to fruition very soon. You never know, and it wouldn't be on the onus of the county of Los Angeles to make anyone get that. We are not in the business of enforcing someone to do something that they don't want to do, or it could be too expensive for them.
Right. Well, you are in the business, though, of saving lives and responding to disasters. And again, I want to thank you and the LA Fire Department. Maroney, I saw him at one of these public meetings. He's the fire chief for Los Angeles County Fire Department. And we know what sacrifices all of you as firefighters, first responders, paramedics did make for these fires and continue to make. And we are grateful to you for your service. And thanks for taking some time to talk with us and help folks better understand where we are with these fires. Really good news about these containment levels. And hopefully folks will start to be able to at least start processing, moving, thinking about what rebuilding will look like, even though, as you said, it's going to be a long process. People have got to just be patient.
Correct.
But thank you, Craig, so much. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. When fires like this happen, there are so many agencies that have to jump into action, and those agencies are working in collaboration with each other. There was a big meeting in the Altadena, Pasadena community on Friday night that brought the fire chief for the LA County, his name is Chief Maroney, that brought other executives from FEMA, from SBA, and from the County of Los Angeles, because people want answers. They want answers about what started these fires. There have been a lot of articles in the Los Angeles Times with some suggestions about what started the fires, although the county and the fire department aren't making any official statements at this moment. So we don't have any official word on how the fires were started, but there's a lot of theories out there, some more credible than others. But we want to talk in this last part of the show about benefits, FEMA benefits, because at this meeting, the FEMA representative was very, very clear about what benefits are available. I'm going to run down some of them for you, but also you can go to any of these emergency disaster centers and meet with FEMA representatives. They are there to assist you. If you live on the west side, the old West Side Pavilion Mall is one of those emergency centers that the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, has put together, and they are open throughout the day and in the evening with resources to help people. If you're in the Pasadena community, Altadena community, Pasadena Community College is an emergency response center. And there are centers all over the County of Los Angeles. Just go to the County of Los Angeles website, go to the City of Los Angeles website, and you can find where those centers are. But just some basics about FEMA. FEMA was created by federal statute. It's called the Stafford Act that created FEMA. So when Trump talks about getting rid of it, it would take an act of Congress. He doesn't have the authority. He doesn't have the power to do so through executive order. And we know he doesn't often respect the Constitution, but he would have to get congressional action to do away with FEMA. And FEMA responds around the country, whether it's Maui, whether it's in North Carolina, whether it's in Louisiana for Katrina, FEMA representatives are the first to land. They're the first on the ground, and they stay. They stay until the disaster has been mitigated. FEMA, at this point, is offering, and when I say offering, you have to apply, you have to be deemed eligible. You can receive up to $43,600 for assistance in losses associated with your structure, meaning your building, your primary residence. If that was burned, if that was harmed in the fire, you might be eligible for $43,600. Contents, your furniture, your televisions, your computers, your clothing, all the contents of your home. FEMA will provide grants for up to $43,600 for your contents. And these are grants. These aren't loans. Once you apply, once you're approved, you get a grant from FEMA. You don't have to pay it back. So that's a maximum of $87,200. Now, some folks have lost so much more than that. Well, FEMA is not able to fill in that gap for every loss that you've made. You've got to apply for your insurance. We talked about before, your homeowner's insurance, your car insurance, any umbrella policies. You got to look at every insurance policy that you have to see if there's a possibility of making a claim against those insurance policies. And then FEMA is there to help supplement what your insurance is going to do. There's also SBA loans for folks who might have a business. SBA does business loans, and they are making an exception. They're also doing personal loans up to $100,000. But again, those are loans. You got to pay those back. They're low interest loans, but it's still a loan. And at this point, there's no indication that SBA is going to forgive those loans once they are taken out. You can go to FEMA at fema.gov to check out their website. But it's really important that you are accessing those resources. FEMA has a deadline. They have a deadline of March 1st for you to make your FEMA claim. So you want to make sure you make that claim. Coming up this month of February, you have the entire month to make that claim. FEMA can also assist you with rental assistance. So people who can't get back into their homes, they have to go rent homes. They will provide up to 18 months of rental assistance. Now that's on top of the $87,200. Sounds like, could be a little complicated for some folks. That's why it's important to you. That's why it's important. And I would advise you to go meet face to face with a FEMA representative at one of these emergency relief centers, because you want to be clear on what you're eligible for and what you're not. We talked about insurance, SBA loans. A lot of folks have GoFundMe accounts. There was some misinformation swirling around the internet that you couldn't get FEMA dollars or FEMA grants if you had GoFundMe. That's categorically false. That's false. That's false. That's false. You can have a GoFundMe. You just can't raise money through a GoFundMe account for the same items, relief items that you are requesting the grant for from FEMA. So just got to make sure it's separate. And so many people have lost so much. I don't think there's going to be a problem for a lot of people making sure that they're not, quote unquote, double dipping. And then there are also other assistance and benefits through the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles. The mayor has already rolled out an emergency executive order to waive 2025's business taxes for those businesses that were impacted by the fires. So it's very important that you're checking these websites, the City of LA's website, the County of LA's website, because almost daily we're hearing about relief efforts. We know the governor of the state of California has like a $2.5 billion relief package that's making its way through Sacramento. Do you want to know what that looks like? Is that going to be, again, low interest or no interest loans for those folks who may be underinsured that need additional revenue to make up the difference between perhaps what their insurance is going to pay and what they need to rebuild their home? So there's a lot of information that folks who have been impacted by the fire need to learn in order to start to put their lives back together and to get back to some, form of normalcy. I don't know. The word normal is an interesting word. And for a lot of folks, there's going to be a new normal. Your life will probably never be the same. Doesn't mean you won't have a great life. Doesn't mean you won't even have, in some cases, a better life. But our mental health professional Spirit told us all that we've been through a lot of trauma, and she recommended that every single person that has been impacted by these fires, whether you know someone that's been impacted or watched it on the news or you've lost your home, that you seek at least one visit with a mental health professional. That's really, really important. And you've heard me say over and over again, this is not the time to make a lot of new friends. It's not the time to make major decisions without the advice of trusted advisors. So if you're settling with your insurance company, if you're signing up with one of these gazillion law firms that may be trying to connect with you, make sure you are vetting folks, you're checking their licenses out, you're getting recommendations from people that you trust, and that you are making decisions, again, with the consultation of people that love you, that care about you, and want the best for you. We're going to stay on this. There's so much to learn, so much information to share about these fires, how they impact not just Los Angeles, the state of California, and this entire country. Because how we as Californians and this nation respond to these fires tells us a lot about how we are going to respond to natural disasters going forward. Thanks so much for joining me right here on the Special Report. We'll be back on Wednesday. We will see you soon. Stay safe.
Calling all BIPOC college students, recent college graduates, and clinicians. Here's my story about CORE, a unique workforce development program that is changing lives. My brother is the most caring person you'll ever meet. With his autism diagnosis, my family had to fight to make sure that the resources he deserved were available. That's why my goal has always been to help children with developmental disabilities and give them chances my brother may have missed. So when I heard about the CORE Fellowship, I knew immediately it was for me. The fellowship opens doors for myself and others like me. They offer training, a stipend while you're learning, job placement, and they'll pay up to $10,000 of my student loan debt. The CORE Fellowship is going to allow me to achieve my life's purpose. They care about me, so I can care about others, like my brother. Visit the website to learn more about the CORE Fellowship. Discover your core passion, your power, and your purpose. Apply today.